Okay, are we ready to go? I want to welcome everybody back who was with the earlier session. And we are very, very lucky to have an incredible luncheon speaker today, Senator Cortez Masto. And this session is going to be brought to you by our sponsor, Dady Gardner, which is one of the preeminent franchise law firms in the country, located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And with that, let me turn it over to the esteemed Ron Gardner, who's going to talk to you and explain a little bit about what's going on in this session.
Thanks, Brian, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. To everybody, it's certainly my pleasure to be here today and be part of the AAFD's Franchisee Leadership Summit again this year. Thanks for the kind words about our firm. I was looking at the AAFD's history this morning, and I noticed that they started about 18 months before we did. So we've both been at it close to 30 years, and our firm has been a long and stalwart supporter of the AAFD and the work that it has been doing in order to make franchising a safer place for franchisees to invest and to have the opportunity to grow generational wealth. I'm a little disappointed because, as if you're a regular attendee of the AFD functions, you know that we typically sponsor the ice cream social. I'm not able to serve any of you ice cream today. You're going to have to find that in your own freezer. But I am certainly pleased to welcome you to this wonderful event in the virtual world. What makes the AA different from other organizations that are out there, and what attracts firms like ours to sponsor events like this, is the holistic approach that they take to total quality franchising. AAFD chapters are given organizational, communication, and benefit resources that are world-class, things that every franchise association needs in order to succeed. But the AAFD goes further than that, pressing for fairer contract terms in both the marketplace and through legislation. The AAFD is a key part of the movement to making sure prospective franchisees and franchise investors are given a fair shake before, during, and after their time as a franchisee. Which brings us to today's luncheon speaker. And for the introduction of today's speaker, please allow me to introduce you to our firm's managing partner, Mark Dady. Mark?
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ron. It really is my distinct pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto from the great state of Nevada. For those of you who don't know the senator, I can tell you that she's doing something that no other federal representative has done for quite some time. And that's pay attention to the plight of franchisees and propose that some things be done about it. For too long, issues of concern to franchisees have really either been ignored or handled solely at the state level. And Senator Cortez Masto and her team are changing that, right? Recently, they put out a report titled Strategies to Improve the Franchise Model, Preventing Unfair and Deceptive Franchise Practices. And what happened there was there were three key things in that report that everybody should know about. First, it explained why the current system of government oversight is inadequate. Second, it provided some examples of how this is, how the franchise model can work, and some examples of how it's gone terribly, terribly wrong. And then the third thing she didn't just stop there. The senator said, all right, what are some solutions that we can propose? What can we do to ensure fair franchise practices in the industry? For those of you who haven't read the report, you need to. While you may have experienced a lot of these things in your own businesses and your own experiences being a franchisee, Senator Cortez Masto and her team have done an incredible job of putting the report together in a way that is both readable and comprehensive. All franchisees should be thankful for her call to action. And that means that going forward, if the senator or anyone else, advocating for the same cause needs your help, we encourage all of you to get involved and provide your support. I certainly hope that this senator's report and her efforts are just the beginning. But what she and her team have accomplished so far is extremely impressive and something that has the potential to impact all of us, which is why we all need to pay close attention to what the senator has to say today. So with that, I'm excited to turn things over to the senator, hear what she has to say. And Senator, thank you for being here today.
Mark, thank you. And good afternoon to everyone. I am glad to join you for the Franchise Leadership Summit today. I also want to thank Keith Miller, Bob Pervin, and Amy Mancuso for everything that they've done to make this franchise conference a success. Now, I know there are terrific franchise corporations out there that empower owners. They create jobs that offer a living wage and form important parts of many communities. Franchises provide opportunities for entrepreneurs to own successful businesses. But for too long, some franchise corporations and lenders have treated entrepreneurs unfairly. And that's what Mark was talking about. I know this because so many people in my home state of Nevada have told me so. These entrepreneurs tell me they've received overly optimistic revenue projections from franchise corporations, or they find that in a dispute with a franchise corporation over contract terms, they're locked into mandatory arbitration clauses that don't give them access to the courts. They're frustrated with provisions in their contracts that allow franchise corporations to overcharge for marketing fees or to demand that franchise owners buy from suppliers who then offer rebates to the franchise corporation. These practices, as you all know, end up stripping small business owners of their wealth, and that's just unacceptable. I've heard from people who have lost their retirement funds, their life savings, and their homes trying just to make sure that they can make sure that the franchise business works and becomes a success. And we also know how important small businesses are to our local communities. So when franchise businesses go under, communities often suffer as well. Workers lose jobs and neighborhoods lose access to the services and economic activity those businesses have provided over the years. In April, as Mark just said, I released a first of its kind report on troubling practices in the franchise industry that have squeezed investors and entrepreneurs for decades. And I want to thank my incredible staff and all of the support that we've had from many of you as we put that report together. It was written to help you and many others by highlighting the issues that we were hearing franchise investors can face. The problem is that entrepreneurs think they are buying a safe and best investment, but sometimes they just are not. In 2020, the franchise industry employed more than 8.6 million people in more than 780,000 franchises. That's more workers in franchising than in the construction industry. We need to make sure that corporations in such a large sector of our economy engage in fair business practices. No small business is risk-free. We know that, but franchises are marketed as safe investments because they're supposed to be proven business models. Franchise owners deserve to know what they're getting into. So in addition to the report, and I hope everybody has an opportunity to review it and get access to it, but I've also introduced the SBA Franchise Loan Transparency Act, which requires franchise corporations to give accurate financial performance information to anyone applying for government-backed loans to buy a franchise. Taxpayers and small business owners fund the Small Business Administration loans that franchise owners use to go into business, and they're the ones who pick up the tab if franchise businesses fail. We shouldn't be putting the power of the federal government behind a franchise corporation that engages in harmful practices. We also need to increase funding and oversight at the federal agencies that oversee corporations so that those agencies can enforce fair standards and contracts. So I am focused on making sure entrepreneurs in Nevada and across the country have the resources and support they need to build a small business and to succeed. So I'm going to keep working to make sure that franchise owners get fair and balanced treatment they deserve from corporations. And I am just so glad to have your partnership in this opportunity to work with all of you. I want to thank the courageous franchise owners who have educated journalists, elected officials, and staff at federal agencies about the risks that some franchises pose to entrepreneurs and who have come to my office. Let me just say, without the comments submitted to the Federal Trade Commission and the letters to my office, press articles, and litigation, I would not have seen the scope of the problem. So I thank all of those who were willing to come forward and your courageousness in doing so. Together, I believe we can make a tremendous difference for franchise owners across the country and for their workers and the communities where they do business. So thank you all again. I hope you have an incredibly successful summit, and I look forward to continued partnership and collaboration and hearing from all of you as well. Thank you again.
Well, Senator Keith Miller here. Thank you very much for your time and you and all your staff's effort. I mean, it's just been incredible, the work that you've done. And I know you introduced a little bill yesterday also, which will help add on that transparency. After you're off, I'll talk with that to the group about requiring disclosure or default information on SBA loans. We're working on a lot of things. Your staff has done a great job. And my motto for this conference to the group is we have to help you help them. We need to do a better job of supporting you and getting them, contacting their representatives to make this happen, because you can't do it alone and you can't do it without the franchisees backing you up. So again, thank you. And that's what we're going to be working on over the next few days, is helping us, trying to help you more, and we'll do a better job.
Well, Keith, thank you. And please, you guys have been there, so supportive. Thank you for testifying before my subcommittee, and just really look forward to further partnership with all of you. Thank you.
That's almost 2 years ago. Isn't that amazing? How the time flew. So,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Senator. So I just wanted to add on, and then I know we have the other session we'll go back at, so I can hit some of the things that I was going to maybe talk about today during my legislative session. But today or yesterday, she did introduce a second SBA bill that would require the SBA to publish default rates on by franchise brand. This is kind of foundational work that needs to be done. It doesn't impact all franchisees necessarily, especially existing franchisees, but it's a foundational work that can change this industry and correct it. Just because you don't get an SBA loan doesn't mean you wouldn't want to know what the default rates were on the SBA default rates were on brands, because that would be somewhat indicative of the success of that brand. But I'm going to be a broken record over the next few days. We have to help them help us. And if we don't do a better job of that, we can't pass legislation. We want to work on legislation that is more a fair franchising legislation, a very comprehensive bill, but we got to get more support to do that. And every franchisee needs to get engaged with that. So we'll probably sign off on this, because I think we're going to take up the rest of the time with this morning session that didn't get complete. I know there's one or two more speakers to do that. And, the senator the Senate is in session today. And I know the senator squeezed us in between votes. And so it's busy back there. It's very difficult to get legislators in on things, even remotely, because they have pretty busy schedules. And so we appreciate her coming in and doing that. So with that, I will turn it back to I believe, Matt, you're controlling the world right now. See, now I really stumped him, huh?
Can you hear me, Keith? It's Amy.
Yep. Hi, Amy.
Great. Hi. So
you're controlling it.
I'm going to control the world for a minute. All right. So I'm just going to ask that the speakers that were on our last panel to check your email. I sent you a link to join us in this session, so we can continue with our first morning session. Stephen Reimel is with us.
And those of us who are only on this can log off and get out of the way, right?
Yes. Thanks, Keith. Thank you for getting the senator here. Okay, Mark Dady, you can exit the studio. Thank you for your time this morning. So we're just waiting. I'm going to let Brian Dillon in. We're just waiting for Bob Purvitt to join us again. Here he is. I see him. For Bob Purvitt to
Can you hear me?
join us again.
I'm,
Here he is. I see him. For Bob Purvitt to
can you hear me?
join us again.
I'm,
Here he is. I see him. For Bob Purvitt
I have a
to
terrible echo.
join us again.
I don't know where the echo is. I have a terrible echo.
Join us again.
Where the echo is.
Bob, are you in two places?
I might be. No, I'm not. No, not now.
Bob, are you in two places?
No.
All right, so Bob, I had to mute you. You need to check your communications. Check your communications. Check your communications. Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to Matt Diamond. Check your communications. Okay, I'm going to turn this back over to Matt Diamond. Check your communications.
So, Amy, you there still? Can you hear me, Brian? Oh, no, I can't hear you, though. There we go. No, I had swapped from my headset. I didn't realize we were coming back so fast. I was trying to make a sandwich while I'm listening to the senator. I'm like, oh, I'm back at the show. And I got a text from my partner in crime, Rudy. He said that our session cut off at exactly 12:30. Does anyone know?
I don't know. And I hope it did, because I told everybody we were in 5-minute break, and hopefully they didn't hear that he said, because we didn't go in 5-minute break. But can you guys hear me?
Yes.
No, I can't.
I don't know if we're publishing to our network. So I don't and I don't know, unfortunately. Let me see if there's anything in chat.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Is anyone be coming back to this?
Sam tells us that we're live. JD, we did not interrupt you until about 12:36 Pacific time.
Okay, so we got all the way to the end, because Rudy said he got kicked out. So I thought maybe the whole room ended.
Matt,
I got stopped here.
Matt, are you trying to talk to us? We can't hear
We
Matt.
can't hear you, Matt.
All right, so let me just put in chat that we can't hear him. Sorry, we're really sorry, folks. This is, as I said, our experiment in terror, because we've never done this before, and thought we had everything covered. What I want to do, we don't know where you lost JD. So JD, if you would pick up with what's your last slide, I'm sure we got, and kind of repeat there, and then we'll go over to John.
That's fine.
Okay. I don't know if somebody's showing your, do we have the slide, Amy?
I'm looking for slide validation.
She probably has it in the other studio, is what I'm worried about. I'm going to go back into private chat and tell everybody we're waiting for.
Are you going to publish all these slides, Bob?
I'm sure we can.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, I can just talk to the slide and just kind of sum everything up.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that, because we're gonna run out of time again, and I want Jonathan to get his opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say, everyone, is it's all about using your influence within, and it's about that power in numbers, helping the franchise system grow, the franchisees. It's also about helping the franchisor grow. As aggravated as we are with them, That's our system, and we want to see it grow and see it become better. And finding different ways to settle our disputes and getting some meaningful changes is super important. And when the franchisor wants something, I think of Silence of the Lambs, quid pro quo. You want something from me? Well, because we have an association, we've set apart all those different ideas. Let's talk about getting some of those things fleshed out. And we've seen lots of that. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the next person speaking today. It's attorney Jonathan Fortman. He's an attorney in St. Louis, Missouri. For the last 15 years, he has concentrated his practice on representing franchisees and claims against the franchisors. He's represented them successfully in the courts throughout the United States. He also consults with individuals looking to purchase a franchise. John is a member of the ABA Forum on Franchising and a member of the AAFD Franchisee Legal Line. Take it away, Jonathan.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. So thanks,
But
JD.
you're a little faint, John. John, you're a little bit faint. If you can turn up your volume a little bit.
Let's see. I'll do what I can. I'll talk louder. Is that better?
That's works. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, JD. And it's a pleasure to follow the senator, because we have been involved with helping her in really her legislative director, Carol Wayman, who was legislative director for Keith Ellison in the House of Representatives before he went off to be Attorney General in Minnesota. And so we provided information to her, and I've been going to speak with her.
I think we just lost John.
Am I back?
No, we're there too.
You're back.
All right, I'm back. Sorry. So if you can go to the next slide. What I'm talking about is using association to avoid litigation, and really, I use this slide on every talk. It's to prevent the franchisor and franchisee being at each other's throats to the point where, we're having to file lawsuits and arbitrations or do all of that stuff, which is not good for business. But more importantly, what we're seeing more and more on the cases that I do group cases with all of these cases. And I do form loose associations of franchisees that are going after the franchisors. And what we see is we talk to all of the franchisees that we can, both current and former, as part of the investigation. And it's a lot of times the franchisees are at each other's throats. And, you have some that are drinking the Kool-Aid still. You have others that are, just want to be done with the system, want to walk away, don't want to be part of the litigation or anything, and everything in between. And, the problem with that is the franchisor in those types of systems where I'm getting involved in, they don't want the franchisees to be united. They want to isolate everybody they can. And so in every single case I do, when I do a press release or file a lawsuit, what we see is the president or CEO of the franchisor will send out an email to all of the franchisees saying that, my clients are a bunch of disgruntled franchisees that are looking to get free money because they screwed up their businesses, they didn't follow the system. And so, it's great for me because then the franchisees that didn't know about what we were doing will contact me. But the other thing is, a lot of the franchisees they're communicating with, I've already talked to, and they feel the same way my clients do, but for whatever reason, they choose not to go forward. So what we're trying to do is avoid that. And it's a lot easier to do before you get to the point of litigation as opposed to doing it as an emergency type of thing to put a group together to litigate. So if you can go to the next slide. And some of this has been talked about, and I'll be brief with it, but what are we trying to do? We're trying to get these franchisees a seat at the table to participate in some of the major decisions. And I put the big ticket items, the change in management, change in ownership, and I'll talk about that more because really I'm going to focus on one subset of things that occur, and that is private equity coming in to buy a franchisor. It seems like every case that I have been doing over the last several years have been systems where the franchisor has been purchased by a private equity firm. And I know a couple of years ago when we were in St. Louis, Zarco talked about private equity and the risk that it poses to the franchisees. And I'm firmly convinced that it's probably the biggest threat facing a lot of these systems. You know, we're looking at system changes, operational issues, those types of things that will result in litigation if they're not taken care of prior to the system totally breaking down. You can go to the next slide, please. So Senator Masto, she includes some case studies in her report. If you have not read her report, I would encourage you to do so. And I'm not going to go too far in depth in these two cases that I have pulled out. These are cases that I did, and cases where my clients were in contact with her office to kind of talk about what had happened to them. And I put the page numbers down. So curves I talked about last time that we were in Arizona, and really, you know, it's what I call dissecting the death of a failing system. So it's a system that was the fastest growing in history, had 10,000 locations by 2006. But if you look now, it's got 254 locations as of June of 2020. 97.5% of locations have closed. And I can tell you, we receive calls at least 2 or 3 times a week of other locations that are closing. So I feel pretty confident that as of now, it's less than 200. And I would predict that in the next 3 or 4 years, the Curves system will be extinct. But what's important about that one is, you know, a private equity firm bought them in the early 2010. And at that point, they'd gone from 10,000 down to about 4,000 locations. Private equity firm comes in, doesn't really communicate with the franchisees, buys the system, and then tries to do some cockamamie things where they don't even like do any research or anything like that. And these things don't work. And so as the system continues to fail, they spend $350,000 of the franchisee's money to do a marketing study. And that marketing study was not disclosed to the franchisees. Some of the franchisees got like surveys online that they filled out and they got back, but they didn't really know what it was for. And what that survey found was that unless that private equity firm invested substantial money into the system, that Curves would continue to maintain what they call the negative halo, and that locations would continue to close at around 15% per year. And that absolutely happened. That private equity firm or Curves did not disclose that to the franchisees, and instead continued to sell different programs to these franchisees, which required them, and these franchisees were all losing money, but then they were required to spend more money and pay that to the franchisor, who knew that a substantial portion of those franchisees would fail before the end of their term. So we filed a lawsuit against them and got a verdict down in Waco, Texas in 2017 on behalf of 52 of the franchisees. And we settled that on appeal, but after it was settled, what the private equity firm did is they basically abandoned it. They sold it for pennies on the dollar to the master franchisee out of Japan, and they walked away. Well, things continue to go south, so we sued them again because they're still doing the same thing. Can we go to the next one? The second one talked about in the senator's report that I want to talk about is Complete Nutrition, which is a franchisor that simply walked away from being a franchise. You know, that was a nutritional supplement franchise with 100 plus locations. It was very successful early on. The founder was a former multi-unit GNC franchisee, and he came up with kind of a higher end concept and started Complete Nutrition. It was so successful that they put a pause on sales when they got to about 125 locations in order to get their infrastructure in place. And during that time, we started to see some failures, maybe 10 or 15%, which I mean is high, but it's not alarming. But before they could really do anything, a private equity firm comes in and buys them. Again, doesn't communicate really with the franchisees, starts to put these different kinds of programs in place, which were not tested, which franchisees knew would fail, and they failed. The private equity firm defaults on their loan in 18 months, and the secured lender comes in. And then what they did is basically mined the customer data of the franchisees and use that to tout online sales and take customers away from the franchisees, because then they could go online and get the product cheaper, or they could go on Amazon. So, then once they had that in place, they have a call with all of the franchisees, in which they tell them, in 30 days, we're not going to be offering franchise services anymore. So you can either pay us $10,000 and keep the name up, or you can go independent, but you'll have to agree to purchase a certain amount of product from us. And, my clients were already failing, were already losing money, and they couldn't afford to take down the signs. They couldn't do any of that. So we sued them in federal court in Nebraska, and that case settled in early 2021 for, a nice sum of money. You can go to the next one. So what do these have in common? There was a lack of association at crucial times here. Both Curves and Complete Nutrition, bought by private equity firms, when there were competitive pressures in the market for each of those systems. For Curves, it was 24-hour fitness and those kinds of outfits. For Complete Nutrition, it was Amazon, Walmart, Sam's. The franchisees were starting to lose money and they were starting to close. Any new initiatives by the franchisors were flopping. There was little advertising because as locations closed, there was less money. And there was no existing current franchisee association. So there's really no communication between the franchisees. You can go to the next one. So what does this show us? I mean, the beauty of doing these types of cases in court, in federal court, is I can do reverse engineering. I can look at, because I get access to all sorts of documents that were never intended to be seen by the franchisees. I get all the internal emails, I get the marketing studies, and all of these different things. I get to depose the heads of the franchisor. I get to depose the senior partners in the equity firms, and I get to really look at all of this, and then to take that about what they knew at that time and what they were telling the franchisees. And so in both cases, these were private equity firms that bought the franchisor, and neither one had any franchising experience. They were used to buying companies that manufacture a product and sold it to the consumer. So they didn't have any experience with the added layer of having to deal with all of the franchisees who were independent businesses. And that was a huge problem. Now, one thing in all of these that I see is these private equity firms are selling the franchisees what we call the big lie. They're telling these franchisees, look, we're here to help and grow your businesses. We're going to keep the same management in place. We're going to have system improvements, more resources. We're experts. We have all of this money, and we're going to throw it at this problem, and we're going to make everything all better. Well, that's a lie, because they're not there to look after your interests. What they're there to do is they're going to have an investment horizon, meaning that they want to keep this investment maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but then they want to get out. They want to sell it. And I think, again, going back to Zarco's talk a couple of years ago, the one thing he did talk about is, they're in there to cut costs. They're in there to increase revenue and cut costs, because that increases the value of the franchisors and increases their profit when they sell. So, but the reason it works is this: they're coming into systems that may be struggling. Curves and and Complete Nutrition were both struggling at the time the private equity firms came in. So you have the franchisees there who have been subjected to the same thing over and over from this franchisor, and they're just tired, and they're, and so here they see somebody that's coming in as their knight in shining armor. So they're thinking, hey, somebody's going to show some interest here and is going to help us be successful. And so they're lulled into, they'll see the senior manager or the founder of the equity firm show up at the annual convention and be real personable and talk about all these things and how great he is. But soon after the sale closes, what the franchisees find is it was all a big lie. Nothing's going to change, and they're going to do things that are kind of half-assed, if you will, but things that don't help the franchisee association. So can you switch to the next one? So what could an association have done different that may have assisted here? Because one thing that Brian talked about, which I think is really important, you shouldn't be setting up an association just to litigate, and you shouldn't be. Now, sometimes it's required, but the other thing that Bob talked about too is, that associations get set up when there's crisis, and then once the crisis passes, the association, kind of dissolves. I think some of that happened with Curves. Curves had an association at one point, but everything was going good, everything was successful, so it just kind of fell by the wayside. But what the association should be able to do in a situation when a private equity firm is showing interest, doing due diligence, or coming in to buy the system, is educate that buyer on the local market issues, initiatives that have worked within the system, and changes that are needed in the system. And when it comes to that, those changes don't necessarily need to require payments of large sums of money. It could be reallocating resources as far as advertising or things like that. But that's your one chance. And if you don't have an association there to do it, what they're going to hear from is, a franchisee here or there, some that, may have their own individual issues that they want to, get to that person or things like that, but they won't hear from the system as a whole. And hopefully with the association, if you had an association in place that could have identified common themes and really gotten out to that private equity firm that, it's not all hunky-dory, that, there are some changes that are needed, then maybe it would have prevented. Now, we can't go back and say for sure, but I can tell you one thing, not having that available was just a recipe for disaster in both of those cases, plus several others, that we've handled. So, and then educating the association members, and not necessarily just the members, but the franchisees as a whole. Because, you'll have franchisees out there that don't want to, that don't think they need to pay into the association or need to pay into the legal fund. But, what you can do is educate the members to track these issues across the system. I mean, that's what I do when I get a group in. I mean, we spend a lot of time doing research into what are the common themes, what are the common issues that are happening between everybody, amongst all of these franchisees. The benefits of a substantial association, letting people know that, yeah, things may be going good now, but what happens if there are these hiccups in the road? What happens when the market changes, when there's advertising issues, things like that? That if you don't have that association up and running, and then you're trying at the last minute to put it together to address the crisis, your leverage is going to be a lot less. And then finally, pooling of resources. You've heard about the legal expense fund, but I think it's very important that an association, even in systems where everything seems to be going okay and you're getting along with the franchisor, that you have an experienced franchisee attorney there to assist, to try and identify issues and prioritize things and let you know what kinds of things we can address through litigation and what kinds of things we cannot. I was talking to to one of the associations who was looking for legal counsel. And, I always ask, okay, what are your goals? And one of their things was, well, we would like for the ability to end our franchise agreement and take down the sign. And it was like, well, that's never going to happen. So instead of expending the energy and the time on dealing with something that will never happen, let's look at the issues that can be addressed. Let's take the small victories that you can, give in to something so that the franchisor can show some success, and then be done with it. So next slide, please. And I always end with this slide. Here's the goal that, I think that most franchisee relationships go through some growing pains, and there's always going to be some issues because, the franchisor is having to deal with, all of these franchisees, and the franchisees are each having to deal with the franchisor under a separate agreement. So there's always going to be some conflict, but, the goal is that, and I, for the life of me, don't understand why franchisors, the ones that I deal with, don't get this, is the success of the franchisor is directly dependent upon the success of the franchisee. So, everybody needs to be headed in a north-south direction. And the association can help you get there, whereas litigation is expensive. It's not very efficient for resolving the dispute, and it's it's very stressful. It's a stressful thing. I mean, I know if I was somebody and I was cross-examining me, I wouldn't like it, and my clients don't like to get cross-examined, but sometimes, unfortunately, it's required. But anyway, I appreciate the time, and again, we'll move along from here, and I guess we'll move to Zoe. And so let me try my cheat sheet. Zoe's been with, I think I can remember it. Zoe's been with the AAFD since 2012. She coordinates with chapters and helps them grow their membership. More importantly for me, she's the coordinator for the legal line, and so anytime I have issues with that, I know who to contact. Zoe lives in San Diego and has a daughter, and like a lot of us parents, spend a lot of time out on the softball field. Back to you, Bob.
Can I be heard yet?
I can hear you.
Thank you. I'm sorry that it was a great introduction for Zoe, and I'm not Zoe. And we are running up against our time constraints again. So Zoe was to be our anchor and to give you some information about the AFD, and I'm supposed to give you some closing remarks. What we're going to do is we're going to create a special session for Zoe after this conference, and we'll invite all of our members to come and hear from her, because I think she has some very valuable information. We're getting ready to start our roundtables, and that'll get us back on schedule. So I want to give the closing to kind of tie some of this together. We are at the halfway mark of our keynote. Our keynote is to talk about empowering franchisee associations, and I hope you've gotten some really good information from our panelists, and I want to thank all of our panelists. I also have to thank Craig Tregellis, who I think is listening in, who was to be one of our panelists, but he had some surgery that made it impossible for him to participate with us today. And Brian jumped in very last minute to cover Craig's material. I think many of the slides that you saw from Brian's were from Craig, and Craig, you've been a terrific ally and asset to the AFD, and hope to keep you there for many, many years to come. And the other thing I want to clean up is you guys have heard today from Heath Miller, and then you heard from Keith Miller, and they are not the same person. Heath Miller is our primary leader and one of the principals of Access Retirement Systems. You'll be hearing more from him. And Keith Miller is the AFD's illustrious director of our public affairs and engagement, and you'll be hearing a lot from Keith during the course of our conference. But I do want to tie together what we've heard today. And it's really a lot of information about why you need to be empowered and how you get empowered and what can be accomplished. I think the thing that I want to tie together most of all is everybody has sort of reemphasized that you got to have a plan. You got to know what it is that your goals are. And you've got to know what your objective is. And you want to, as Stephen Covey famously said, you want to be able to proceed with the end in mind. You want to know where you want to get to. The goal is to usually embrace your franchisor in a way that you're all sharing a common mission to have a great brand. And everything that we try to do to help empower your association is usually with that goal and that opportunity in mind. So what's next? In 4 minutes, we're going to start our roundtables. The roundtable discussions, if you've some of you have pre-selected, are all going to be handled in the Ring Central platform because we are able to encompass a lot of people participating, and this is a very participatory event. Each of you will be able to go to one of 10 roundtables, and after 20 minutes, we're going to say switch, and you'll be able to go to another roundtable, and we'll do that at another 20 minutes, and we're going to do that 4 times. So each of the attendees will be able to participate in a discussion that'll have 10 to 20 people in each discussion group, led by one of our preeminent legal line attorneys that are all sponsoring our roundtable session. Amy's going to come on, I hope, in a minute and tell you exactly how to do that, because I don't know how to tell you to get over to the Ring Central. Maybe it's as easy as clicking on a link in your agenda. But what I do want to say about the roundtables is that they're very valuable. We do them when we're in person. We move them around the room, and it's your chance to really kind of deep dive into some issues. All of the subject matters are focused on some aspect of empowering your association. So we're still in the mode of empowering franchisee associations. I see Amy there, I'm waving at her. And so Amy, why don't you tell us how we get there?
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So all you need to do is through the agenda, you'll see all of the roundtables listed, and you're just going to click on the roundtable that you're going to be joining. There'll be a link inside. You can click on the link or copy and paste it into your browser. You will be held in a waiting room until our host arrive, which is our roundtable discussion leader. And as Bob said, they're going to last for 20 minutes. And then we're going to ask you to leave the session and go back to your agenda. We have a 2-minute break between to give you time to transition. And then you'll go back to your agenda and select the next roundtable, which will start at 1:52. So hopefully if anybody has any issues or questions, you can always reach out to our team, and we will help walk you through that.
Amy, is there a way that we're going to be able to signal people in the sessions that it's time to move on?
Yeah, so we will be giving you a 5-minute warning and then a 2-minute warning. And that at the 20-minute sharp, we are going to have to end the discussion and allow people to transition in that 2 minutes so we can start the next roundtable session for 20 minutes.
Very good. See you guys all, and hopefully we'll be able to look at each other and enjoy each other's company.
All right, thank you all.
1 minute.